Good afternoon, everyone. Scientists predict a mini ice age hits the UK by 2030. Well, that'll be a global event. And even at this moment, our infrastructure copes with the cold in the northeast, frozen pipes, nuclear power plants unable to receive power down perfectly good lines with no explanation. Garbage piling up that's becoming a health hazard in New York City. Look back in history, decline in agriculture, the number of wars increased 41% during the cool time. Oh yeah, they forget to talk about population decline, Wolf minimum decline, modern minimum decline, modern minimum and Dalton minimum decline. New global temperature anomalies, Ice Age Farm are giving us this. Russia, minus 70 on the thermometer Celsius, but the news only reporting minus 60. Speaking of news anomalies, you've been told it is record cold only in the United States. Well, let's take a look at the rest of the Northern Hemisphere. In the UK, you're on tap for Category 2 hurricane force winds blowing through today and tomorrow. And while you're watching the video, please remember to subscribe to Adapt 2030 and click that bell to get the latest updates. New report out talking about scientists predicting mini ice age hitting the UK by 2030, bringing back frost fares. Although the river's quite different, it's not nearly as shallow as it was in the 1600s. Nonetheless, they're talking about temperatures start dropping from 2021. I think that's a little bit far out. The temperature's starting to drop this year already noticeably across the Northern Hemisphere, with anomalies in the Southern Hemisphere. Tasmania, snow in the middle of summer. And the article goes on to talk about the sun becoming active again in the 2050s. So if that's true, then we're looking at about a 30-year cold period. It's based on Valentina Zarkova's work looking back at magnetic waves on the sun. They're talking about 2021 lasting for 33 years. I personally believe the amplification has started right now, and we actually are 3 to 5 years early on this prediction. Now, what's going on in the United States is our infrastructure can't even cope with the cold that's right now. Intensifying cold is just going to decimate the U.S. Look at this. We already have frozen pipes disrupting refineries, anomalous, unexplainable electricity disruptions to the nuclear power plant. Like, those lines were fine. They were not taken down in a storm, but for some reason that electric current was not making it to the station. There was no damage along point A to point B in transmission. It just makes no sense. It's still anomalous. And if we're looking at the amount of trash in New York City that's already causing a health hazard, can you imagine when our services really break down? This is since the bombogenesis. This much garbage is piling up all over New York City, mounds of trash. This is on the sides of the sidewalk. People are actually going through trash tunnels, of what it looks like, Upper West Side there. And if it's this problematic already before the cold really sets in, we need to start rethinking right now. Let's talk about past solar activity, all the grand solar minimums listed here in order. And I encourage you to go back through history and take a look at each of these start and end dates and what happened in the middle between those two with population migration, decline in population, wars, famines, and all these other things that go along with the grand solar minimum. I was directed over to Ice Age Farmers wiki page. Well done. Excellent resource full of maps. Here's one I hadn't seen before. This is the northern pole view of the global temperature map, modern minimum. The temperature variation, and we can see that dark blue over Siberia, Russia, and all through the United States. Warmer in Alaska. And this is the traditional map that we've taken a look at. That's also referenced, but that polar view is really different. Also on that same map page, full glaciation cycle, and this is probably going to be something very similar to where the extent of the cold in the grand solar minimum will hit, and you can also see where the crop growing regions would be affected with that. Now, speaking of crop growing being affected, let's look back at this report, European winters, famine plagues driven by changing climates. And I thought we were the only ones that ever changed the climate. Well, apparently not. What the report points out is agricultural production decreased as it stagnated into a cold climate. Also, the number of wars increased by 41% during cold phases, particularly heavy during the 30 Years' War, and atrocities is an understatement of what went on back then. Let's talk about population decline during the grand solar minimums. Nobody wants to touch us with a 10-foot pole. They barely even want to talk about the nuclear power station that went down anomalously with no disruptions and the lines weren't broken. Somehow that power did not transmit. Collapse of the European population, wolf minimum, 14th century, here we go, down, down, down. Then we start to see the same thing globally. India, China, Europe, down. And then let's jump up to the Maunder minimum, and we look at that steep decline in population around, say, 1670. And the same thing is mimicked in Spain. Decline in 1650, decline in the Dalton minimum heading into 1820. Now, if there's even a possibility of another grand solar minimum on our doorstep, we need to really start talking about this and taking it seriously. Our crops are going to be disrupted. There's going to be massive population migration. Back then, there were only 1 billion people on the planet, and the effects were astounding. Now we have 8 billion people. They have capital. They're going to be moving. And whoa, is there going to be a cultural clash when these people try to move to warmer climates when they're not welcome? Now, the news has been feeding you the same thing over and over again for these last weeks while this incredible cold crushes the United States and Canada. They keep telling you the cold's the only place in America. That's it. It's just Canada and North America. That's it. Well, Asia's having all-time record cold. There's snows in Tasmania right now in the middle of summer in Australia. New Zealand just got pelted with an ice storm, winter storm hitting in the middle of summer in New Zealand as well. So here's the temperature gradient map for the Northern Hemisphere. That surely does not look centered over just the United States and Canada. So that news feed that's giving you this, well, make your own judgment, do your own research. I've linked everything below so you can backtrack this story. Jumping over to Russia, brutal cold in Siberia. Actually hit minus 68 Celsius, minus 70 Celsius, but in the news reports they only put it at minus 60. So what is up with this underreporting of the cold temperatures that's happening globally? And staying with the UK, since the mini ice age was focused on the UK, if it hits there, obviously it's going to be a global event. But another wind anomaly, Category 2, hurricane force winds with a winter storm are going to blast over the UK. Looks like the 15th, 16th, and 17th. So UK, you're on tap for that. Wide out here, you can definitely see the winds pushing up at 140 kilometers per hour. Thanks for watching. Hope you got something out of the video. It's time for us to start and have a serious discussion on where are 8 billion people going to migrate to. That's a statistical impossibility that everybody's going to survive this event.